beginning. She bootstraps herself, you know, from the first quarks. They came together in little trios. They had social rules built into them. And their social rules told them who to flee and who to gang up with. And they had an inherent need to gang up in groups of 3. Where did all this sociality and rules? Where did this etiquette book for quarks come from? How is it inherent in quarks? This is ridiculous. Coming from nowhere, and these quarks ganged up in protons and neutrons. Well, we are those protons and neutrons, and we're sitting here thinking, and we're sitting here talking. And we're the very first way the cosmos has ever discovered to think and talk and come up with art. What's the point of all this, right? The cosmos is a search engine constantly seeking for possibilities. You know, we used to talk in the 1960s about seeking your potential. Well, the cosmos is constantly looking for her new possibilities, and she's finding possibilities that would seem to any of the rest of us to be absolutely impossible. And she's doing it right now through everybody in this room. She's doing it right now through the Western system. Now, we have this peculiar property of dreaming. And sometimes our dreams come true within our lifetime. But sometimes the mere fact that we dream upon them helps a multi-generational scheme. For example, once upon a time, we dreamt of flying. Now, Carl Sagan feels that that dream is so inherent to us that it goes all the way back to 2.5 billion years ago. But we only have a record of it back to the myth of Daedalus, 800 BC, 2,800 years ago. So we know we were dreaming of flying 2,800 years ago. Was that a realistic dream? If you sat around like a guy named George Cayley, who tried to invent this little vertical thing for gliders that didn't exist, and spent 70 years of his entire life, because he had an independent income. He was one of those artists with an independent income. He sat around for 70 years designing this vertical thing for gliders that didn't exist. If you had been his mother, his father, his brother, or his wife, what would you have said to George Cayley? George, you are crazy. This is a ridiculous waste of your time. Look how you've wasted an entire life and all the money that your father gave you. Well, that turned out to be the vertical tail of the airplanes that we use today. In other words, 2,800 years of dreaming, 2,800 years of scheming, 2,800 years of useless things like Leonardo da Vinci's doodles led over the course of a multi-generational enterprise to our being able to fly to LA in 5 hours. Today, for a somewhat reasonable, more money than I have, but a somewhat reasonable price for most of us. That's the kind of thing that this civilization does. Now, how does it do it? It does it through being a search engine, and it uses a combination, like a bee hive. It uses a combination of worker bees who exploit a known and discoverer bees who search an unknown. And you and I are among the searchers of the unknown. We deliberately court discomfort.
Yeah, my last question before we ask some people to participate.
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask about this issue of the bees. Howard has a very interesting chapter about how bees work and the hive and so forth. And I want to relate it to something we talked about privately before the discussion began.
Right.
The bees go out, and some bees get lost and go wander, aren't able to find the pollen and so forth, and they wander around randomly.
Right.
They come back, and they're heroes because they're covered with pollen.
Right.
They're a great bee. The thing I would say about that is, but do bees have this ability that seems so important to me, to human beings, and is this outside of your scheme of things? When human beings make mistakes, and it is the bee searching around randomly is not really a mistake, but you can do something and it's a mistake. And from the disaster, from the mistake, to say, wait a minute, maybe if I radicalize the mistake, I can discover something. And I relate this somehow, I'm not sure what the relation is, but we were talking before the official session tonight about the handicap principle.
Right.
And maybe you can talk about that, and the guy who invented it, and how that, because you seem to be talking about the handicap principle this evening, actually, in terms of the stress and strain of the complication of life, the strangeness of life.
Right. Well, let me I might not understand the handicap principle the same way that you do, so correct me if I'm wrong. But Ahmad Zahavi, an Israeli scientist, is responsible for this thing in evolutionary biology called the handicap principle. And basically, think of the peacock. You know, favorite example of evolutionary biologists everywhere, and its tail. That tail is a huge handicap. I mean, it basically is a billboard saying, eat me. Here I am. It makes it very easy for a predator to zero in on you. So why in the world would creatures evolve something that is gaudy as all hell and sets them up as a target for anybody who's hungry? And is that an adequate summary of the... Okay, now listen to this. You ready? We think consumerism is a sin. We think that piling up material objects is a terrible thing, a curse. And we are wrong, because nature provides for these things. Now, one thing to remember, any good thing in overdose is a poison. And that applies to consumerism. You can be a compulsive spender and destroy your entire life. You can pile up so many goods in your house that you can't even walk through the house anymore. And that is an illness. But in general, nature is consumerist to the nth degree. Think of this. I mean, aside from the peacock's tail, which is a materialist venture par excellence and a terrible waste.
Yeah, you're leaving something, you're leaving the important thing
Okay,
out.
go ahead.
You're leaving out that the peacock who has this great tail is sending a message to a potential mate.
Right.
I am so great, I would be such a great, powerful husband,
Yeah.
that I can afford to take the risk of having a big tail.
That's right. And for every peacock that manages to get the girls, there are 15 peacocks who go without.
Yeah, but now, we had a president, John F. Kennedy,
Right.
who decided, let's go to the moon.
Right.
What? Spending all that money to go to the moon instead
Right.
of putting it in a school? Is that a handicap principle kind of thing? An excessive thing that proved that, oh, we have all kinds of capabilities that people didn't imagine, and I'm just doing it to prove that and to give people great feelings about
Okay,
America.
you're beginning to see a connection here. Surplus is one of the things the cosmos works with all the time. She uses it to explore. She uses surplus to create. What do I mean? Well, you and I are both men the last time I checked. And every man in this room is going to generate 18 trillion sperm during his lifetime. We will be satisfied if 2, 3, maybe 4 of those sperm find a home. What happens to the other 17 trillion, 999.7, whatever it is, sperm who don't make it? The universe doesn't care. We do. I mean, we do. Because human beings are thrown out there as fodder for the gods, as fodder for this great gamble of social search engine, an evolutionary search machine that's constantly searching new possibilities, constantly looking into new possible cores that can become entire niches. And you're right, for every Van Gogh, I mean, Van Gogh's story is a nightmare. This guy never got any attention during his lifetime. His brother was an art dealer. You'd think he could sell some art. No, his brother couldn't sell his work. And then after he was dead, his